the relationship with the dollar doesn't begin and end with the Swissy, certainly. Remember that our majors, let's define here. I want to make sure we're all talking about the same stuff. So when I'm talking about majors, I'm talking about euro US dollar. I'm talking about dollar yen. Obviously, we're talking about the Swissy, the dollar Swissy, and of course the cable. Okay. Those are what I'll call my dollar correlated majors. Yeah? Okay. Now, that's 4 of the 7 pairs that I trade fairly actively. The other 3 are ComDolls. And this is where we start to look at, you know, the commodity index. I'll show you that correlation. We look at gold, we look at crude. So that means we're looking at the dollar Canada, we're looking at the Aussie, we're looking at the Kiwi, Australian US dollar, and the New Zealand dollar US dollar. And those are ComDolls. Those are my ComDolls, commodity currencies. Now, if you ask me, and I've always kept this opinion, I think every currency is a commodity currency, because how can I talk about the dollar and the euro, the yen, the Swissy, and the cable and not talk about crude oil? Okay? There's a terrific correlation between the dollar yen and the Dow. Okay? There's a correlation between the dollar and commodities, and especially commodities in the Aussie and the Kiwi. Their main commodity is gold, but they have a terrific correlation back to the general commodity index period, right? So when you talk about trading Forex, this is not just some bubble we're trading outside of the rest of the world. This is, to me, the market, Forex, that affects everything else. And that's where I've always said, and I firmly believe, that Forex traders have a very unique perch above all the financial markets. And that's a really exciting place to be, because that opens up the entire world to you. That opens up the entire market to you. I'm not just a Forex trader, I trade futures too. But having that background in futures sure as heck helps me with correlation and understanding what these pairs might do. Remember, there's one thing that every one of these pairs has in common, and it's the reason for my market pulse. Let me get rid of this Swissy here, the Swissy overlay. The reason it's so important to keep an eye on the market pulse is, take a look at the dollar's correlation with crude. You know, I mentioned that I think that every commodity or every pair has a certain amount of a commodity currency aspect to it. Well, here's dollar and crude. You can see the inverse correlation. Now, I'm not saying there's a direct line that I'll draw from the euro to crude oil, but I do know that the dollar and the euro US dollar, the fiber, have an inverse correlation as well. So really, in essence, I'm talking about the euro moving sympathetically with crude, moving inverse to the dollar index. So you better believe that if I'm trading the euro US dollar, ceilings in the dollar, floors in crude oil, which is what we're dealing with right now, absolutely have an effect. So what am I looking at? Well, the same things I would look at in the Forex pairs themselves. I will have a 0088 that I'm dealing with right now on the dollar index. Well, that 0088 is going to be a ceiling, and if that becomes a ceiling wherever we are, as I'm hitting, you know, this high, by the way, was 87.88, and the closer I get to 88 and a ceiling here, the more likely I am to run into a floor on the euro US dollar. Now, when I look at crude oil and that inverse relationship back to the US dollar, the more likely crude oil is to find a floor, the more likely the US dollar is to find a ceiling. So you better believe that I'm interested in what happens in crude oil outside of its relationship with the Canada. Now, most often when people bring up the crude oil, it's in discussion to what's happening on the dollar Canada. And that absolutely has another correlation, fantastic correlation. But that's not the only place I'll look. So here's crude oil in black and white. Again, here's this topping action I'm getting here. I'm sorry, this is the dollar Canada in black and white, and crude oil in green and red. Okay, and as I'm getting this topping action here on the dollar Canada, up here at 3,000. Would 3,000 be a level I'd be watching anyway on the dollar Canada? Absolutely. I don't need crude oil to tell me that I could find potentially a ceiling at a 000 on the dollar Canada. But certainly knowing that crude oil has been bouncing strengthens the Canada versus the US dollar, and hence we start seeing prices pull back. You see this weakness we're seeing on the dollar Canada? That's absolutely related back to strength in the dollar, weakness in the dollar, and strength in the loonie itself based upon the crude oil bounce. So again, another correlation.